of hot water heaters that you can tap for drinking.
Mm-hmm.
That water is still perfectly good. It's safe. It doesn't need to be treated. Because when there's flooding, earthquakes, other disasters, remember what I said earlier, that water can become polluted or contaminated with foreign substances.
Mm-hmm.
That water is no longer considered safe to drink, in my eyes.
I want to ask you this. But feel free to finish the last point. But I'm curious of this: what things would you recommend as far as to grow food, for example, seeds that one might want to get now? The easiest things to grow in most climates during most times of the year.
You mean like a garden thing?
A garden thing. I would think that lettuce and spinach and perhaps kale could be grown indoors with the assistance of some indoor lighting. It's just something that a lot more people are asking themselves these days.
Yeah, that's a little bit out of my area of expertise there, but I know as growing up on a farm as a kid that all foods don't grow equally well in all areas, in all regions. In some areas, like down south, they could grow cotton and they could grow other vegetables a lot easier than we could in the Missouri Ozarks. We couldn't grow cotton for some reason. I guess because of the humidity and the heat differences or something. But I know that you have to be very careful with, not careful, but you have to take into consideration the area you're living in and try to find the produce that will grow best in your particular area.
Mm. And perhaps get some seeds that have been climatized for the region. I heard for those listening locally that Territorial is a great company. There's also Victory down in Malala. But this is not an ad for them, just letting some people know that those are some of the local companies. So yes, your book definitely does specialize in wilderness survival because there might be a situation where we have to leave our homes and we don't have a food supply. We don't have, for that matter, hospitals if we get hurt. So you also cover first aid. I have very little first aid training. Say myself, for example, if I was to go through the basics in first aid, where would you recommend I look first? What are the most essential?
Well, the first thing I would do is call the American Red Cross.
Okay. Yeah, and they do have free manuals that they distribute.
That's right, they probably do. But my biggest reason for calling them is that I know they give classes on first aid.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it should be a requirement in high school that you can't graduate until you complete a CPR first aid course.
Well, it might make more sense in some of these other classes that they demand that we take. That's another conversation. What else do you think people should be learning in high school as well when it comes to things like this? I can't tell you that I will not forget my experiences being, how old was I? It was probably the 4th grade or the 6th grade, but many people remember being sent to outdoor school. And I'm actually somewhat near Eagle Fern Camp, where I went to outdoor school, and that was just an amazing time.
Well, I don't really know. There's a lot of courses I think that might be good. First aid would be a good one. I think swimming might be another good one.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I don't know. I think we need to stop and look at our education program across the United States. I mean, I'm not saying I got answers. I have very few in the education field.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of our classes may not be lined up with society the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, when I went through school, which was a few years before you, believe me, we didn't have a lot of the classes that are offered today.
Mm-hmm.
We had basic core items, if you will. Reading, writing, and arithmetic were the big three. And there was some biology, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it wasn't until I got into college, working on my undergraduate degree, that I discovered there's a whole world full of education out there that I'd been missing.
Well, I'm really building up my collection of books, and you're going to be the new edition. You're probably going to be book number 12. But I'm fascinated by the difference of opinions and expertise. I've also found in the preparedness business there are massive egos, and people say, you can't do this. And to me, I think preparedness is really about a can-do attitude and kind of looking at all the knowledge that's out there. There's a lot of things that Indians knew. about medicinal plants and wild plants. How much do you cover in terms of edible plants in your book?
Oh, very few. And the reason for that is because it's fairly dangerous to be walking around gnawing on plants if you're unsure what you're eating on. For instance, water hemlock can kill a horse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if you don't know what you're eating, you're taking a very, very big risk. I do cover the Army's edibility test, which is a very long, drawn-out process. It takes about 24 to 30 hours to complete to see if a plant is edible. But one of the things to keep in mind is there are some mutant strains going around these days in some of our plants. For instance,
dandelions.
That's a prime example. It's exactly what I was going to bring up. 20 years ago, you could go out and make a mill of dandelions, and they're the only plant on the edibility test that gives off a milky sap that was safe to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I would no longer probably eat those.
Now, so, it's kind of like martial arts training. You want to have some hands-on experience. You can't simply learn from a book. And so with plants, it's kind of the same thing. Going on walking tours with people that have some knowledge of it is a great way to go. And I'm just going to put in a quick plug for John Kalis's book. You can go find out about that at wildfoodadventures.com. He'll take you out and show you some of the plants here in the Pacific Northwest. So if there is someone, and other people watch this in other states, if there's someone you can contact that specializes in this field, it's definitely a pleasant way to connect with nature as well as being prepared. Go ahead.
Good.
We haven't really got into shelters much, and there's a couple other categories that we also need to cover in terms of your book. Where would you like to start with that?
I don't know. You pick an area.
The lean-to. The lean-to is my favorite. I made a lean-to with a group of 6 people a couple years ago. I think I should show that clip again. I'm going to be making a mini preparedness documentary, Gary, with the best of interviews. I'll put you in it from the people I've interviewed on the show. I'll be working on that in a couple months. But I think a lean-to is a great thing to learn here in the Pacific Northwest with the abundance of trees.
You're fading out on me. I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
A little bit louder, please.
Okay, a little bit louder?
Yeah.
All right. How's that?
That's better.
Okay. So what do you cover in your book with shelters? I'm sure you have the lean-to. I've seen in other wilderness books even shelters being made out of snow into the earth.
Oh yeah, I've slept in those snow trench. Essentially, you dig it about 6 or 7 feet long, about 3 feet wide, and it's about 3 feet deep or 2 feet deep as you can make it, pretty much, and then line it with pine boughs or some other material. If you don't have pine around, you might have to use a blanket or whatever you've got, and then lay pieces of wood over it, hopefully not something dead that will, give way and allow the snow to bury you, but you want it to be fairly green wood or firm wood, and then cover it with pine boughs, and then cover the pine boughs with snow. And it's actually fairly warm in those things. I mean, any snow shelter is not going to keep you so warm that you're as comfortable as in your own home, but you're in no danger of freezing to death. The temperature would probably be 34, 36, 32, somewhere in that area, depending on whether or not you had a candle with you. But the key thing you want to remember is to keep about a 2.5, 3-inch diameter hole in the top of any shelter you make for ventilation.
Now,
because if you don't, carbon monoxide can get you.
The interesting thing about the degree range that you mentioned is that, say the power goes out and there's a whole bunch of food in the freezer and the fridge, would you suggest people take those steps and get that shovel out and construct a root cellar?
Well, not necessarily. It may be too late, depending on what the reason for the natural disaster is.
Yeah, what region someone might be in, yeah.
Yeah. If it's cold weather, you can probably just put your meats in a pillowcase and tie a rope to them and swing them over a tree, or just set them up on the shelf if you have an outside storage area like we do, and our freezer is in that, we could just leave it in the freezer. It's not going to hurt anything if the weather is cold. If the weather is hot, the best thing for you to do would be to initially is to take some duct tape and cover that lid real well, seal it, and leave that meat in there Now, it's not going to thaw out for a couple of days if you get it sealed well to start with. And then you can hope the weather comes on. I got a portable generator, so I don't worry about it a whole lot.
Now, this book you got for sale right now, it's 308 pages in length. That's pretty large.
That's 308 pages. It's a 5x8 book, and it's really getting some good reviews right now.
Yeah, here's a question I've been burning to ask. In the region that you're at, I kind of want to go back to what's taking place in your area and the flooding. Are you seeing a lot of people working together? Are there stories of looting? I've read about some other stories pertaining to suicides. What's it really like down there?
Well, where I'm at, everything's normal.
Mm-hmm. Are you kind of in the country?
Well, no, I'm close to Jackson, on the outside small town. I really can't say what it's like in Alabama. I'm not there, but I'm sure it's horrible. You're going to hear all kinds of rumors. Some will be true, some will be false, I'm sure. And there's going to be all kinds of tales coming out. I've heard no reports of looting. There may be. I have no idea. But it's not being publicized if it's taking place. And I don't suspect that it is. Of course, in each situation, sometimes you have folks that take advantage. So I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. I hope not. You know, the situation's bad enough for the survivors as it is, especially if they've lost family of loved ones.
Well, I hope this gets people thinking, for example, here in the Pacific Northwest, about preparedness, whether it be an earthquake, whether it be terrorism, whether it be World War III. I think that's actually on the table. So there's definitely a lot of different factors here. But the Earth is definitely very interesting. You know, on this show we look at solar flares and their potential correlation to earthquakes. So in no way, shape, or form would I consider things normal on the Earth right now, outside of the box of flooding and some of the other things taking place in your region, the tornadoes. What are some other crises, events that one might want to be prepared for? In other words, what are some of your other motivations for putting this book together?
Well, there's a number of things. I mean, natural disasters cover all different shapes and forms. It's actually, the way I describe them, is an act of God that just kind of throws the daily routine out of whack and results in death or injury or change in your lifestyle that's severe. For instance, you can have flooding, tornadoes, earthquakes. You can have excessive heat waves, extreme cold periods, thunderstorms and lightning storms, tsunami, wildfires, hazardous chemical spills, hurricanes, terrorist attacks, nuclear power plants, and the list goes on and on. So to be prepared for each and every one of those is probably impossible as far as gear and equipment goes. But to be prepared mentally, I think, can very well be covered. You can prepare yourself through education, through training, such as the Red Cross, as we had talked earlier, or taking a course on how to identify edible plants, or maybe a survival course that's offered by one of the local facilities. There's a number of ways you can prepare yourself and your family. If you think that's a whole lot of garbage and you really don't want to do it, well, at least pick up a couple of good books, and I would recommend mine as one of them. Learn all you can about survival and first aid. Because once that disaster hits, if you don't have the gear at that moment and you don't have the knowledge at that moment, it's very unlikely you're going to get it anytime soon.
Now, I'm holding up my cell phone now. Folks, please do not rely on this to get a hold of your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your wife, your husband, your kids, your grandparents, or your other significant others and friends. Have a meetup spot. For those of you living in Portland, if there's a group of people that are working together that are going to stay in the city, have an agreed upon meeting spot where if something were to happen, a spot is picked where you can easily access that. I also just want to throw this in and I'm sure you go into this in your book, it's definitely discussed in many books, to remember the kids. Yeah, good timing, Bill. And the things that they may need, in their pack. A friend of mine buys extra clothing for his daughter.